Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Caroline. I'm a registered dietitian and there's something that I haven't told you guys about here on the channel. I didn't just want to drop it in passing in a vlog or in another video. I wanted to sit down and really explain what's going on. And I know that I've been alluding to different health updates in a couple of my videos so far. In this video, I'm going to give you all of the details of what's been going on and what I am currently navigating going forward. Just a couple of weeks ago, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Before I get into the story of how that came to be and how it's impacting my life and my body, I want to explain what Hashimoto's is first so that it makes a little bit more sense as I go through the story, and so that you can learn more about the disease because it is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in the United States. And this was crazy to me to find out because I was aware of it. Being a dietitian going through dietetic school, they told me about it, but they didn't give me a ton of details on it. And the more research that I've done since getting diagnosed, I've discovered how many people, particularly women, have this disease and go undiagnosed for so long. So it's my goal in this video to not only share my story, but also to give you guys a little bit of insight if you or someone else you know might be going through something similar, and hopefully provide you with some resources to get help. So first, what is Hashimoto's thyroiditis? Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune disease that impacts the thyroid gland. The thyroid is a small butterfly-shaped gland that's located in the front of the neck, and it plays a very important role in regulating a lot of bodily processes, including metabolism, body temperature, heart function, digestion, brain development, muscle function, sex hormones, bone health, hair, skin, nails, and overall energy and mood. So now, as you guys can probably tell, the thyroid gland is involved in just about every process of our body. So when something is wrong with our thyroid gland, it can impact so many bodily systems. Now, Hashimoto's disease doesn't just randomly pop up in your body and all of a sudden your thyroid doesn't work. There is a process that it goes through and a 5-stage progression. So I want to share the 5 stages with you guys. Number 1 is the autoimmune process. This is when your body's immune system mistakenly identifies an organ or a gland as being an invader and starts attacking itself. This happens in any autoimmune condition, but in Hashimoto's in particular, the immune attack is happening on the thyroid gland. The body starts fighting the thyroid by producing thyroid-specific antibodies. And these you can actually get tested on labs, and they're going to come up as thyroid peroxidase antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. Now, the second stage is euthyroidism, or the early stage. At this point, the thyroid gland may still be functioning normally, and the person might not even have a ton of obvious symptoms going on. Some blood tests might reveal the presence of antibodies going on, but your thyroid hormones themselves, T3 and T4, should still be in normal range. Stage 3 is subclinical hypothyroidism. As the autoimmune attack on the thyroid gland continues, so will the progressive dysfunction of the thyroid. This will start to result in decreased production of thyroid hormone. This is also when some people might start experiencing symptoms such as weight gain or fatigue or cold sensitivity. In stage 4, we have overt hypothyroidism. Since it's stage 4, it is a more advanced stage of Hashimoto's disease, and this is when we're going to start to see a more significant decline in the thyroid hormone production. We're also going to see those symptoms come through stronger, including the fatigue, the weight gain, the cold intolerance, and even things like dry skin or hair loss. Bean wanted to join the party. This is my little emotional support bean. Just as the name of the stage says, overt hypothyroidism, this is when we're typically going to be able to see it on a lab test. And you can test this by looking at your TSH, your T3, and your T4 levels. Now, stage 5 is end-stage hypothyroidism. And usually if we get to this point without any sort of treatment or management, there's been a significant amount of damage sustained to the thyroid gland. At this stage, the symptoms that the person is experiencing have become relatively severe as well. The fatigue is much, much worse. It can even impact their mental health or other more severe life-threatening conditions. This is where the person now has to be very consistent about getting their blood work done and checking their levels, and is most likely dependent on thyroid medication. So now that we know all of the stages of Hashimoto's and how it shows up and how it progresses, how do you even get an autoimmune disease in the first place? In order for it to show up, you need 3 things to create your perfect storm. Number 1 is a genetic predisposition. Number 2 is a trigger. And number 3 is intestinal permeability. Number 1, a genetic predisposition means that autoimmunity likely runs somewhere in your genetic line. So you contain the gene that number 2, the trigger, could then turn on and activate. Number 3, intestinal permeability, is what's very commonly referred to as leaky gut. Having some sort of intestinal permeability is very, very common in those with autoimmune diseases and conditions, so that's why it's very important to be taking care of your internal health, particularly your gut health, whether you have an autoimmune condition or not. So now, how did all 3 of these things come together to create my perfect storm to develop into an autoimmune disease? So number 1, genetic predisposition. Autoimmunity runs in my family, and I've known that since birth. And my sisters and I have even gotten testing before to see what our risk was to develop any sort of autoimmune disease or condition. So this wasn't really a surprise to me. I knew that I had an increased risk of developing something like this, especially considering my history, which we'll get into in a minute, and also the life that I live. I will say that I have worked to dramatically decrease my stress in the last year or so before I even knew that I had Hashimoto's, but being a registered dietitian and going through all of that schooling, being in sports my whole life, running my own business, I don't really live a stress-free lifestyle. Now, number 2 is a trigger. This is the one that I had to go down the rabbit hole to figure out, and this is where the story begins. I actually realized my root cause because of an accident that happened in my lab work. And no, it's not anything crazy. And no, it wasn't anything crazy or scary. We just went back to test my other thyroid antibody once we got the first one back, and we accidentally tested for the Epstein-Barr virus antibody. And this one actually came back pretty high. I got mono in my sophomore year of high school, and it absolutely wiped me out. I remember sleeping for 12 hours a night. I couldn't bring myself to go to school on some days, and looking back, I do think that it played a role in my declining performance in sports at the time, which is partially why I chose to give up competition cheerleading in high school. I felt like I just couldn't perform like I previously could, and as somebody that really likes to do my best at things, I was really struggling with feeling like I was failing all of the time, and then I started getting more and more injuries, and I ultimately quit. Around the same time, I was in and out of doctor's offices. We were trying to figure out what was going on, and I randomly gained 15 to 20 pounds, and we had no idea why. We just chalked it up to mono. And due to gaining that much weight, I ended up developing an eating disorder. At that point in my life, I was kind of known for my appearance. I went to a really small school in Georgia, and I would always get comments on my body or what I was wearing. So when my body started changing and I just couldn't figure out what was going on, I started researching the healthiest way to eat and how I could properly fuel my body. And then I started working out, and then it just slowly spiraled into an eating disorder. As I was going through that, that's when more and more symptoms started to pop up, such as constipation, cold intolerance, really low energy, massive anxiety, and I just attributed it to the eating disorder. Looking back, I now realize that it likely just made what was going on internally much, much worse. So after doing a full inventory of my life and trying to get to the root cause, I do believe that that was the trigger that set off my Hashimoto's disease. After I healed from my eating disorder, I started to feel better because I wasn't over-exercising, I wasn't under-eating, and this is when I got into bodybuilding and I started lifting weights. I found Whitney Simmons videos, and I was using my dad's dumbbell set in the basement of my childhood home. And I loved pushing myself to get stronger. When I got into the gym, it was just a way to get skinnier and try to lose weight. So to use the gym as a way to build up my body was incredible. And in order to do that, I had to eat more food, which ultimately helped me heal my relationship with food. This is also when I decided to intentionally put on weight, which was great, and I started building muscle and I started feeling healthier, but I just continued to get more and more inflamed. I just felt puffy all of the time, and my cheeks were huge, and I thought that that was just my body composition. And then I started to see it pop up in my fitness journey itself. So every time I would diet, I could only get to a certain point before my calories would have to get really, really low and my cardio would have to get really high. And at that point, it just wasn't worth it. So I would pull out and I would reverse diet. And then after a couple of weeks, around like the 6-week mark, I would just put on like 3 pounds in a week, and I would just start gaining weight. And I had no idea why, and neither did any of my coaches. So every time I would diet and reverse diet, I would end up gaining more weight. So I just kept getting heavier over time. My natural settling point before that was around like 125 pounds. And about mid-2021, I was 140 pounds. Not to say anything against that weight at all, but for my body, that was really uncomfortable and not a happy place to be. So over time, I kept developing increasing food sensitivities and digestive issues, and the constipation got really bad. Finally, in the spring of 2021, I remember a week that I just couldn't digest food, and I was laying in bed and it felt like I was having a heart attack because my stomach was hurting so bad. This was around the time that I started working with Dasha at Core Perform because I went to a GI doctor and they just told me that I had IBS and I was gonna have to live with it, and they gave me Miralax and a laxative. So when I started working with Dasha, we did a stool test in the form of a GI map, which came back and showed that I very, very likely had SIBO. Again, remember, the GI map cannot diagnose SIBO. The only way that you can diagnose SIBO is with a breath test, but the GI map also came back showing that I had a parasite, which we now know to be a tapeworm, which is absolutely wild because I live in the United States, so like how the heck did I get a tapeworm? But going through my root cause deep dive, I remembered that in 2017, when my family and I were flying out of Costa Rica, leaving the airport, my dad, my mom, and I all got a cup of coffee, and we all ended up with food poisoning. And this is likely where I contracted the parasite. So that had been living in my body for 4 years. So after we figured out what was going on, we spent about 4 weeks preparing my body, boosting my immunity, supporting my liver, doing all the things that we needed to do to go into a kill phase. We spent 16 to 20 weeks killing things off of my gut with a round of antimicrobials. At this same time, I also had to fully pull back on exercise. And at the same time, we were increasing food and I was gaining weight again. I will say though that my inflammation was slowly dropping at this point because we were treating some of the root cause that was going on. During this time, I also had to go on a pretty restrictive diet in order to manage any sort of triggers that I would be consuming and to really support gut healing. So now I'm super grateful for this time because it gave me some experience as to how I need to eat right now to put my Hashimoto's into remission. So after that, my digestion did get better, but I was still living in a state of
am I gonna poop today?
I wasn't super regular to the point where I knew without a doubt I was gonna have a bowel movement. So that was through middle to end of 2021. And then the next time that I had a Hashimoto's flare up, I didn't know at the time, but I know now looking back, was actually at the end of 2021. I was super stressed out with my internship and I just remember gaining pounds of water overnight. And again, I had to fully pull back on my training. I was eating the same thing every day and I was just gaining weight for no reason. I had no idea why all of this was happening, and now looking back, I can see why. So now, how did I find out that I actually had Hashimoto's disease? So with my health history and being a bodybuilder, I was getting regular blood work done anyways. When I was about 3 weeks out from my first show this season, I decided to try a new lab requisition that I had never tried before. It was pretty similar to the one that I was using, but I wanted to test it out because it was a little bit cheaper and I wanted to see what it was like for my clients. This one in particular had the TPO antibodies on it, and I had never had that tested before. So then after prep ended, I hopped on a call with a doctor at Magnus Medical, which is a company that we partner with at Beyond Built that helps to support our clients finding optimal health or with any sort of potential hormone support that they need so that we are able to provide them with a care team. Per usual, I wanted to be the guinea pig and put myself through the process. When I hopped on the call with the doctor, we're going over my labs and she asks me,
"Did you know you have Hashimoto's disease?"
And I just sat there for a minute like, what? No, I didn't know I had Hashimoto's disease. And at first I was a little taken back, but to be quite honest, I was just relieved. My whole life I had been struggling with these things and had no idea what it was. And to be honest, I was pretty mean to my body for a long time. You work out so hard, you track your macros, you're an online coach, you're a dietitian. Why can't you do this? If you can help other people do this, why don't you work properly? And now it makes me kind of sad looking back at how upset I was with my body when I just didn't know what was going on. So after the initial call with the diagnosis, I went back in to get my other thyroid antibody tested, thyroglobulin, and this is where we accidentally pulled the Epstein-Barr virus antibody. So I'm very grateful for this whole situation because we accidentally found out that I had Hashimoto's and we accidentally figured out that it came from when I had mono when I was 15. And I know that a lot of people that are in bodybuilding will blame health conditions that pop up for them on bodybuilding. And I am not here to say that it is bodybuilding's fault at all because I did know that I had a predisposition and I understood the risks before I started. So I honestly felt liberated by this whole thing. I felt like a failure and a fraud for so long, and now looking back, I just have so much empathy for myself, and I'm also really excited to make my future a game of how healthy can I get and how well can I take care of myself. So now, what do I do about it? Being the nerd and the dietitian that I am, I absolutely went down the research rabbit hole figuring out what Hashimoto's is, what it does to the body, how can you properly manage it. What's most commonly given to people is thyroid medication. And this is usually where the care stops. They just say, oh, this is what it is, take your thyroid medication and that's all you can do. I was working with another company during my prep for hormone support, and I did this as a preemptive measure going into prep to maintain my levels. So at about 6 weeks out, I had started taking Armour Thyroid just as a way to support my natural levels during prep. And looking back, it actually probably made the situation better. So again, a very happy accident. After I got my other thyroid antibody labs back, I hopped on a call with the doctor again, and we made final adjustments to my thyroid medication, and I now consistently take that every day. But that isn't where you stop. A lot of people do report feeling better being on thyroid medication, but there are still so many underlying symptoms that are not being addressed or treated that you actually do have the power to make a difference in. And this is when I stumbled upon Dr. Isabella Wentz. She's coined herself the thyroid pharmacist, and she's had her own personal story with discovering she has Hashimoto's, and she became her own guinea pig to figure out all of these protocols in order to put it back into remission. I'm going to link her books that she wrote about it in the description of this YouTube video, and let me tell you that I have had the most fun researching about it and understanding what different things do in the body and how it can help Hashimoto's, and ultimately how you can take control over your life back. So naturally, I binged the entire book in like a week, and mind you, it is a very long book. But as of about 2 weeks ago, I have started implementing the protocol. And let me tell you, I haven't had this level of concentration and energy in probably years. I was fighting implementing the protocol at first because you do have to make pretty large dietary and lifestyle changes, and coming out of prep, I didn't really want to be restricting my food, and I just wasn't really in the mental space to do it. But being in a Hashimoto's flare-up, my body was just not having it. And you guys even saw my last full day of eating, I was eating my cottage cheese bowls, but it got to the point where it was just sitting in my stomach and I felt like I couldn't even digest it. My energy levels were also absolute trash, and I finally just had enough of my own bullshit, and I decided it was time to make a change. So I bit the bullet, I removed gluten, I removed dairy, and let me tell you, it has made a world of a difference. I also started implementing some of the protocols that she mentions in her book. So at first I implemented a soft version of the protocol because I was traveling to Alabama for my sister's graduation from college, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fully dive into the full protocol until I was home. But this is now my second week in the protocol, which is a total of 12 weeks, starting with 2 weeks of liver detoxification, 4 weeks of adrenal support, and then 6 weeks of a gut protocol. So next week I'll be entering into the adrenal protocols. I'm already feeling so much better in terms of my concentration, my mood, my energy, my digestion, and I could honestly cry because I'm not hitting a massive wall by like 2 p.m. and feeling like I can't work and I can't get things done. And I remember for so long I was just so upset at myself for not being as productive as I used to be, or beating myself up because I could only get 1 to 2 things done, and fighting this internal battle of you need to rest versus you need to push yourself. So now I have these protocols, I have a plan, and I'm excited to follow it. I will say, going into this 4-week adrenal protocol, it does require a lot of rest, a lot of downtime, which is something that a woman like myself that really likes to push herself and likes to train a lot and likes to get a lot of things done is kind of struggling with. But I know that's the exact reason that I need to go all in and commit to it. So what's next for me? This is the really bittersweet part, because this means that I need to take a step back from bodybuilding. My body's not in a hormonally productive place to put on tissue anyways, and at this point it feels pretty irresponsible to think about another show date when my body is in a state of turmoil. And it honestly really breaks my heart because I love bodybuilding so much. But I'm just not one that is good at moderation. I need to go all in on something in order to fully commit and really just be present with myself right now. And I know that my future self is really going to thank me for doing this work right now. Never say never. I'm not saying it's completely off of the table, but as of right now, I need to be where I'm at right now and really just focus on putting Hashimoto's into remission and have fun with the game of how healthy can I get myself. Right now I'm only weight training 3 days a week. I'm doing hot yoga 1 to 2 times a week. My goal is to sit in the sauna once a week. So in this next 4 weeks, I need to get way more consistent with doing that. I'm not really doing cardio anymore. My step goal is around like 8K a day. And so my next video is going to be a day in the life of me doing a liver detox. So what was the documentation of me getting my pro card is now turning into me transitioning into what I am coining my wellness era. I just turned 25 last week, so I'm calling this my quarter life glow up, and I'm really just pouring myself into taking the best care of my body possible. So expect to see full days of eating gluten and dairy free, trying out some different forms of movement, and what I've been having a lot of fun with is a cleaner lifestyle, less toxins, cleaner beauty products, cleaner products in my home, so a full wellness transformation. So if you or anybody that you know is struggling with something like this, or you just want to take a deeper look at what's going on inside of your body related to your thyroid, I'm going to drop resources for the lab requisition that I did get that tested my antibody. This lab requisition in particular is a good one to just get a pulse on what's going on in your body, and it will also give you any sort of flag that you need to dive deeper if needed, related to your thyroid or your sex hormones or your cortisol, whatever might be true for you. I'm also going to leave links to the books that I referenced in this video that helped me learn a ton about Hashimoto's and how to take care of my body, as well as the protocols that I'm following. And lastly, if you do get your labs done, if your doctor gets your labs done, please make sure that you get a copy of it and you're not just trusting when they say that you're fine. My levels were technically fine based on the ranges that they give you on the lab requisition, but most of the reference ranges that they're giving you on standard labs include so many different kinds of people that also likely have some sort of dysfunction going on. So finding somebody that you can work with that either specializes in the area or takes more of a functional approach and uses functional ranges is likely your best bet, so that you can find what's truly optimal, not just what's within range. I really do appreciate the support always, whether it was during my bodybuilding journey or now entering into my wellness era, and I hope that this was helpful to some of you guys who might be struggling with the same thing. Be sure to subscribe for more videos as I document my journey putting Hashimoto's into remission and my transition out of bodybuilding and into a more true wellness lifestyle.